Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Broering. As always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Mason. We'll talk about sports topics of local interest. We got our gambling segment, of which I'm going to guess it wasn't so good. I know my best bet of the week was just atrociously, embarrassingly bad. And my favorite portion of the podcast where you can go to the experts, hit up the hashtag #AskSkinny. You can ask me a question on any topic. It does not have to be sports related. It can be, but we sometimes like the ones that are not sports related. Rick, feels like this week flew by, and I don't need anybody to give me a pity party, but between 11 a.m. Central Time on Sunday and 7 o'clock Monday night, other than working and traveling, I slept all of 3 hours. I was beat.
Well, we all feel bad for you, first of all, but really what we want to know is what happened Saturday night in Kansas City. Was there any escapades?
No, I did come close to hopping into a trunk of a car. We had a party of 5 going out to dinner and a party of 6 coming back in a very small car. So I'll give you the lay of the land. So Mike Petraglia was the driver because he's the one who's the most responsible of the group.
Right.
Paul Daner Jr. sat in the front seat. He was probably the bigger guy in the group. Paul's not a big guy by any stretch, but the bigger guy.
He's looking a little slimmer these days.
Yeah, he looks great. No. I mean, but he's bigger than the other people I'm about to tell you about.
Yeah, he's like 6'3".
In the back seat going, it was just James Rapine, Kelsey Conway, and myself. And Kelsey's tiny. James is in good shape. And so that was perfect. 3 people in the back seat. But then we added a fourth, Sam Green, a photographer for the Enquirer, who I like quite a lot. He joined us for dinner. And so then we kind of, so we all kind of sat there going, are we going to squeeze 4 in the back seat? I said, you know what? Once on a trip when I was doing NKU basketball, I did hop into the trunk of a car as we were going out to have beers. And that became a pretty famous photo at the time, or infamous, if you will. I said, I've done it before. I'll do it again. So they opened the trunk and they said, you won't do it. I said, oh, I'll do it. I've done it before. I'll do it again. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's not exactly like it's a long trip. We got an 8-minute trip downtown from where we're at. I'll do it. And as I started to do it, everybody said, no. So we all squeezed in the back seat of the car. But I came darn close, Rick. Darn close.
All I know is there would have been a post on local12.com had that got rear-ended, and we would have had to do a memorial and everything for Skinny.
Yeah.
That would have just been terrible. We made this podcast more interesting. That's
but then I will tell you this. Then we broke another law because we crammed 4 people into a back seat. Nobody was wearing a seatbelt.
Yeah, I don't know which. I think the trunk is still more dangerous because if you get rear-ended there, you're in trouble.
Yeah. I would think if we got rear-ended without seatbelts on, we wouldn't be in good shape either, though.
Not great either. That's true. All right, let's get into the Bengals. Yep. Of course, if you're listening to this by now, you know that they lost by 1 to the Chiefs, 26-25 last Sunday. We'll try to, obviously, you're doing your post-game recaps with Mike Petraglia, so we'll try to hit on new things and things that have been updated since you guys do those recaps. But Skinny, let's start with this. I saw a different, harder-to-guard offensive game plan from the Bengals on Sunday. I also think Joe Burrow and some of his teammates played much better. So my question to you is, do you think the Bengals turn around from week 1 to week 2? And yes, I know they lost the game, but I think we all agree they looked much better in doing so. Was that more about changes made to the offensive scheme, in your opinion, or was that more about Joe Burrow just playing better?
I think both, and it's a great point. I'm actually we were thinking we were going to talk to Dan Pitcher, the offensive coordinator, on Monday. It turned out we ended up talking to Lou Anarumo instead, so we're going to talk to Dan tomorrow. And I kind of have laid the groundwork between talking to Burrow after the game, Zach Taylor, a couple of questions I asked him on Monday, a couple of the tight ends, Eric All, Mike Gesicki, after the game and on Monday as well. And then I want to get Pitch's point of it. I thought them leaning into the tight ends was just brilliant. It's a strength of this team, to be honest with you. I didn't know if it would be, but it sure seems to be. I think they're leaning into a lot more 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends and 2 receivers, as opposed to what they've done in the past, which was 11 personnel, 1 tight end and 3 wide receivers. That's when you had the big 3 of T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Tyler Boyd. Well, you don't have 2 of them at the moment. You're hopefully going to get 1 back. And honestly, and I don't, this is going to be critical, and it probably is fair to be critical, I guess. I mean, the wide receivers other than Jamar Chase, and I can't include T. Higgins because he hasn't played yet, they're just pedestrian. I mean, Jermaine Burton caught the long route. That's all he can do at the moment is go deep. Andre Yoshivas had 2 touchdown catches. You know how many other catches he had in the game? None. And again, that's a nice red zone target to have. I'm not besmirching that, but the wide receivers other than Jamar, and Jamar wasn't exactly, he didn't have a ton of targets in this game. The wide receivers other than Jamar, though, just aren't all that great. They don't win one-on-ones enough. And so I think they thought, you know what? We got tight ends that can do this. Let's lean into the tight end group. So now you bring back T. Higgins and make him on the outside, Jamar on the outside, and now these tight ends as weapons more so than a third wide receiver. I think you kind of found yourself a little something.
Well, and it looked like they were. I think one of the things that always comes up is the vanilla, or it's too easy to game plan for the Bengals. There's not enough pre-snap motion. All of these things always come up early in the season. And whether the tight end game plan is going to stick or it's something you can use every week or not, it's a new wrinkle. It was something different to guard. It looked a little bit confusing out there, I think, for the defense, or at least for people watching. That's how it appeared. And again, maybe the defensive coordinator is looking at what the Bengals are throwing out there, and that's nothing to them. Like they're completely confident. They prepared for it all week. We don't know that, but I just know it looked different from what the Bengals seem to do every other week when they struggle offensively and don't move the ball and don't get the chains moving. So I think we said we needed to see this team respond from the week 1 game, and they didn't necessarily have to win, but they needed to look the part of a challenger against the Chiefs. And they did that, Skinny. I mean, this looked like a team that was who we expected them to be, a challenger in the AFC, a real contender. Now, the frustrating part about that is it makes the week 1 loss to the Patriots all the more frustrating.
Absolutely.
Because you are the team we expected you to be. You should have beat the Patriots by multiple scores, and you didn't.
Yeah, no, the thing that this has done is it just doesn't give you a lot of margin for error to lose another likely winnable game, right? I mean, you can't lose to Washington. You can't lose to Carolina. You have to be 2-2 going to play, well, not going, but playing Baltimore in week 5. But it does show you that there is a sign of life. And I think the other thing too, Rick, is, there was obviously the 14 missed tackles in the opener and the 170 plus yards rushing allowed. But really, through 2 games, this defense has given up 32 points. That's it. They gave up 13 in the opener, 3 more on the Charlie Jones fumble. That was they didn't give up the first down. They held them to a field goal there, and 7 in the game on Sunday was a scoop and score fumble return. So the defense has given up 32 points. The pass defense, the first week it was just Jacoby Brissett, right? And that guy shouldn't tear you up, and he didn't. He was very, very mediocre. But then Patrick Mahomes. 151 yards is all they gave up to Patrick Mahomes, and 44 of those on one play. I think I read this stat, and I didn't look it up myself, but I think he had 5 completions over the line of scrimmage in the game, and that was it.
Wow.
I mean, what are we talking about? Are we talking about this defense suddenly flipping a switch? And I don't want to call it being an elite category because it still has holes. I mean, you're not getting a ton of pass rush up the middle, although they were much, much better in this game. And I think it's why Trey Hendrickson wound up having the sacks in the game he did. And plus, he's been a game wrecker the first 2 games. But I think it says a lot about what they're doing in coverage. They're doing a really solid job. Yes, I know there was a bust on Cam Taylor-Britt. Deep ball beat him. And the next time they tried him on that, he picks it off one-handed. And it's going to happen in the league. You're getting beat. I mean, every cornerback's going to get beat at some point, but you better learn from it. Cam did. So I think I'm hanging my hat right now on, to your point, the offense looked the part. You're getting a big part back in T. Higgins, maybe as soon as Monday. And your defense has turned in my opinion, 2 winning performances, even despite all the tackle issues in that New England game. You still only gave up 13 points.
That's right. Going back to the issues in the New England game, though, I think most of the issues that were most concerning was how much they struggled against the run. And from that perspective, Kansas City sets up as a pretty good matchup in that way because they just won't commit to running the football. No matter how much you struggle against it defensively, they're still going to put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands and let him do him. I think Lou, for whatever reason, he's proven he can put together a nice game plan for Patrick Mahomes. He's
sure
done
can.
That time after time, and I think it kind of plays well to the Bengals' strengths. I want to talk about Lou for a second because you guys got him earlier this week, as you mentioned, and I was looking for video. No one posted the video on YouTube, so I'm just going to have to read you what he said. But his answer for why rookie Dijon Anthony was on the field for the 4th and 16 play resulted in the defensive pass interference that ultimately won the game for the Chiefs. The quote was this. He, talking about Dijon Anthony, showed the ability in training camp. He showed the ability to go get the ball in both the preseason games, being around where he's supposed to be, Anarumo said. He's athletic. He just has a nose for that part of the game. It would be foolish not to use him. We teach our guys to be aggressive and be aggressively smart. We don't want them being timid and they catch the ball and everybody wants to know why. It was a bang-bang play, and unfortunately, it went against us. So, Skinny, I'll ask you. We got Lou's reaction to it or his explanation for it. Was it wrong to put that kind of trust in rookie Dijon Anthony, who had played a total of 7 NFL snaps before that penalty?
It is in the context of this. They don't trust Jordan Battle. I mean, they just don't. And that's on Jordan Battle. That's not on the coaching staff. You can say, well, you should have put him on the field. He played. They don't trust him right now. They just don't. He's not in the shape they want him to be in. I think some of it is, it's a lingering effect from last year. I thought he had a pretty good camp, but again, and I go back to this, fans want to scream when things go wrong about why didn't you use this guy? And I understand it, but coaches, if they don't trust the guy on the field, you got to play somebody else. And they trusted Dejon Anthony. It stinks that a rookie was put maybe in that position. And unfortunately, it was a bang play that he was there a hair early on. And it was interference, in my opinion. I think you would agree with that too, that it was interference.
Definitely.
It wasn't egregious, but it was interference.
Yeah.
And if you trust the guy, you let him roll with it. And I've heard people, well, what about Mike Hilton? Well, Mike Hilton's 5'8". Dejon Anthony's got a little bit of length in that situation. You want probably a longer guy. And they've been repping that package since camp. In fact, I can't remember what day it was in camp. It might have been the Colts practice where a bunch of us stand there going, when they go to this big nickel or this dime look, it's Dejon Anthony. It's not Jordan Battle. It's not blah, blah, blah. It's Dejon Anthony. They've been repping this for a long time. And so this is the package. And unfortunately, the kid made an error.
Skinny, the way a lot of fans described it was that like Dejon Anthony had been subbed in to take out a veteran or something. That's not the case. They were putting an extra safety on the field.
That was the package. Yeah, that's the package.
So he was the next guy in line. To your point, if you don't want him out there, that's fine. But then you have to tell us who should be out there in his place. And the answer to that question is exactly what you pointed out. It's Jordan Battle. Jordan Battle had played, what, 1 snap in this game? 0 snaps in this game?
Might have been 0. I didn't look at I haven't looked back at the
stat.
It wasn't much. It wasn't much.
They're not playing him. So it's not like he was ready to go, locked in, warmed up. I mean, there's no difference.
And they haven't, he doesn't rep that package with that group. Dejon Anthony does.
Even worse. He wasn't going to be prepared at all. So that's the thing when I hear fans complain about it, it's like, yeah, it's not ideal to be putting a rookie who hasn't played many snaps at all in his career in that situation. At the same time, you want that personnel package on the field, and he's the next guy. There's no one else to put there that's a better option. So I don't really understand what the complaint is. It sucks that he was the guy. Yeah, maybe you want a deeper secondary going forward, but like, that's the situation that you were in. I have no issue with him being on the field.
Yeah, and again, I understand fans' point because you've seen Jordan Battle play, right? And he's had some good moments. But
he also stinks. He's also come up with big penalties in opportunity. His first game, I think, a preseason game, he got a stupid penalty, didn't he? That negated a third down stop.
It might have.
It was his first or second preseason game. I remember he got a stupid penalty that we all talked about.
But to the point of all of it is, the coaches have repped Dejon Anthony there for a reason. They believe him more than they believe Jordan Battle at the moment. Sorry for that, folks. But that, again, you're not out there every day. I'm not out there. I don't see every practice, for goodness sakes. We see 30 minutes of practice, but I have to trust that. Listen, you think they're going to put a kid out there and go, boy, we got to throw the kid out there. Golly. I mean, we got, no, they've repped this kid. They trust this kid. He just happened to make a bad play in just a tick early.
Yeah. I get the idea that a rookie who's not played any snaps being in that spot is probably too much for him. And fans might be absolutely right about the inexperience cost the Bengals and cost Dejon Anthony in that moment. But that's the nature of sports. That's how all of this stuff works. I just really don't have a problem with it. The other thing
would be nice if Jordan Battle had earned his way back into the rotation. That's what would be nice.
I agree with that. Yeah, more than anything, that's the issue, is that Jordan Battle has been a complete flop, quite honestly, since the Bengals got him. Jamar Chase, he generated lots of conversation again this week, Skinny. A lot of people are talking about his terrible penalty that killed the Bengals' drive on third down there, or it was second down, put them in third and long situation, and they ended up having to kick a field goal. They might have kicked a field goal anyway on that drive, but it was still pretty egregious at the time. I'm more worried about the fact that he was completely locked up by the Chiefs. He had 4 catches, 35 yards. He's yet to get in the end zone this season. He looks frustrated. He looks like he's out of his game. What's your take on where we're at with Jamar Chase? Is he becoming an issue for this team? Is it getting to the point of he's not himself out there?
I hope the penalty was the end of all of this. I think it was a culmination of all the stuff he's gone through. I really do. He thought it was a hip drop tackle, which is being
which the NFL's close.
No, it was. I agree with that, but I'm saying that's what he thought it was. And here's a guy who took out an insurance policy supposedly last week on himself for $50 million. So he's thinking about injury, right? And I get it.
He's thinking about himself. That's for sure. He's thinking about himself a whole lot right now.
Yeah, and I think that at this point, there's frustration of the lack of targets because teams are taking him away because, again, the other wide receivers aren't winning. And now maybe after this last game where the Bengals lean so heavily into tight ends and you get T. Higgins back, it will free some things up for Jamar Chase. I think you're seeing this across the league, Rick. There's been a lot of stories. I know it's only 2 weeks, but about how passing touchdowns and passing in general is down across the league. Defenses maybe are starting to figure some of this stuff out of, listen, we just need to take away the 1-star guy. And if the other guy's not good enough, we're going to win one-on-one with the rest of the crew. And I think you're seeing some of that where teams just don't want to give up big plays and they're not giving up big plays. They're saying you want to get 10, 12 plays. You think you can do 10, 12 plays down the field without committing a penalty or a turnover? Have at it, offenses. And they're just not.
what has Lou Anarumo always said? Yards don't equal points.
Yep.
Well,
No.
I think the rest of the NFL is starting to agree with that. We'll give up a bunch of yards, chew it up all drive, and then kick a field goal at the end. We're not going to let you get in the end zone, and we're going to blanket all of your top receiving options. I think that's right, Skinny, and I understand the frustration from Jamar Chase's standpoint of not getting enough targets in games. But I'm also now looking at a guy who, at first, I mean, this whole Holden thing, I thought he was really handling it pretty well. He was still showing up. He was still keeping a good line of communication and
had a solid week one, not a great week one, but a solid week one with very little practice under his belt.
I'm going back a little farther than that because I think the issues really changed when that day when he said he showed up for practice when media wasn't there. And Zach Taylor said he'll be back tomorrow. He's going to practice and he's going to play in week one. And then he threw Zach Taylor under the bus and he didn't show up. Ever since then, it feels like Jamar Chase has been very diva-esque. It feels like he's been very selfish. And that penalty in that moment was completely him losing his mind. He even had a teammate, Joe Burrow, come over, tell him, hey, knock it off. You're going to cost us a penalty. And he still was so selfish. He had to go point his finger in that ref's face and yell at him. That's a guy who just doesn't care right now about anything but himself. And look, I understand that it's a tough situation. He wants his money, all of that, but people are bending over backwards to make excuses for these guys and give them the benefit of the doubt beyond the benefit of the doubt, talking about things like the mental anguish that he's gone through. Skinny, the mental anguish we're talking about is him playing for $4 million or $34 million.
Correct.
Forgive me if I don't feel too bad for him. I think he can figure out how to do his job without losing his mind.
Yeah, I have no problem with him trying to do the hold in. Again, I still don't understand it if at the end of the day you were going to cave. But okay, I get that part. And that could be construed as selfish, but I'm that part doesn't bother me. But that penalty does bother me because that is completely selfish in the moment. It's about you. And instead of being 3rd and 7 from the 30, again, it's not an automatic first down, but it sure is hell a lot easier than 3rd and 22 when all you were trying to do was throw back into field goal range because that's all they were doing. And I understand you want to get back in field goal range, and they did with a 10-yard pass. I mean, if that drive results in a touchdown, do you know what Kansas City has to do at the end of the game instead of kick a field goal? They got to go score a touchdown.
It could have very well cost the Bengals the game in that moment. It was a huge penalty, and it was completely avoidable because the ref gave him an opportunity to get away. He let him yell right in his face, get up on him, point at him, and he let him walk away. And then Joe Burrow got involved and said, don't do this. We need you right now. We need these yards. And Jamar still had to go back to the ref at that point. And by the way, let's not forget, after week one, Jamar also threw Joe Burrow under the bus in his comments saying he slowed me up on the one or we should have had a touchdown. So Jamar is basically all for himself at this point. And I'm not saying that's who he is permanently. I'm not saying Bengal fans shouldn't root like hell for him when he gets back to being normal. But I'm just saying he is 100% acting like a diva and pushing all the Bengals fans away from him at the moment.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Rick, and it was an underplayed play in week one. It was when the Bengals, when fans wanted the Bengals to go for it on 4th down and they decided to punt. What happens if New England fumbles that punt and the Bengals recover? Guess what? They wouldn't have gotten the ball. You know why? Because Jamar Chase decided to walk off the field as the ball was being snapped, and they were penalized. The penalty was tacked on the end of the play. But again, what if the punt returner fumbled that punt, Rick? What if?
I said because you were too selfish and people got mad at me.
Yeah, no, it was an absolutely selfish act. Get off the field. Get your ass off the field.
And by the way, here's what really bothers me about that. That's not who Jamar Chase has been since he's been for the Bengals. He has not been this type of guy, and it's annoying to see him making this sort of heel turn over a contract situation that is going to get resolved if he just hangs in there a little bit. I don't know if it's his agent or if it's him or the people around him, but he's going away that is not good for the Bengals right now, and hopefully that gets resolved in the next couple of weeks.
Well, and again, maybe it gets resolved when T. Higgins comes back and all the coverage doesn't get rolled to him all the time, right? And suddenly he becomes a focal point, and that's a possibility too.
Yeah. On Tuesday, the Bengals signed free agent defensive tackle Lawrence Guy, 6'4", 315 pounds.
Just a guy.
14th-year player out of Arizona State. He spent the last 7 years with the Patriots. Any thoughts on Lawrence Guy, or is he just a guy, as you
I think he is just a guy, but he does have experience. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been a part of Super Bowl winners.
Is he going to be on the field, do you think, or is he just a body for
No, I mean, I can't answer that question until we see what the injury report looks like on Thursday. We're doing this podcast on Wednesday because the Bengals are off today. Everything's pushed back a day this week. Tomorrow is the first day of the Bengals practice week. I think that they needed at least bodies in the building to start repping in case Sheldon Rankins and or BJ Hill can't go. I mean, at the end of that game on Sunday. They were down to 2 tackles. Jay Tufele, who wouldn't be up if not for McKinley Jackson being on IR and Chris Jenkins being inactive because of a broken thumb. I mean, he would literally be inactive. And there he is, one of 2 tackles left. And Zach Carter might be in the inactive group as well if you had your full complement of tackles. If you had your full rotation of tackles, it would be Sheldon Rankins, BJ Hill, McKinley Jackson, Chris Jenkins. So Zach Carter. So you literally had 2 tackles at the end of that game playing who wouldn't even be up on game day if it was a perfect world. So they needed bodies. I think that's mostly what this is an insurance policy safety net, and it makes all the sense in the world.
All right. Bill Barnwell from ESPN wrote something titled Ranking the Winless NFL Teams. And he had a couple of stats in here that I wanted to point out first. He said, since the league moved to its 32-team format in 2002, about 1 in every 10 teams to start 0-2 has made it to the postseason. Bengals fans obviously know that because we seem to talk about it every year here over the last few seasons. But also, the chance of advancing to the postseason for the Bengals is now at 43.2%, according to ESPN's FPI. And here was Barnwell's ranking of the 0-2 teams. Number 1, and he ranked them in order of best chance to make the playoffs.
Okay.
Number 1, Cincinnati Bengals. Number 2 was the Ravens. Number 3, Jaguars. 4, Rams. 5, Titans. 6, Colts. 7, Broncos. 9, Giants. 8 Giants, and 9 Panthers. Skinny, what are your thoughts on that? Do you believe that the Bengals are clearly the best 0-2 team?
I could argue Ravens, right? But I also think the Ravens have some bigger issues, especially with honestly on both sides of the ball. Yeah, that's probably right. In fact, I can almost draw the line of demarcation at the first 2 teams. I don't think Jacksonville's very good. I'm not a big Trevor. I'm still flabbergasted at the contract Trevor Lawrence got. I think he's an okay quarterback. I don't think he's a top tier quarterback. I'm not even sure I believe he's a franchise quarterback. And the Rams are just so banged up right now. I don't know how they dig out of this. I think that Detroit game was a great game, the opener, but man, they've gotten guys hurt on the offensive line, the receiving core. They're just a banged up mess. I mean, I guess if they can get healthy, they could make another run at it. But I honestly think you draw the line at the top 2 teams, the Bengals and the Ravens.
I agree. I mean, anything after those top four teams
for
that
sure.
You about
for sure.
Are like, we expect it to be terrible. If they are terrible, there's nothing there for them. Like you said, Jaguars, Rams, maybe there's a little hope for, but really it's just the Bengals and the Ravens in this situation. And I think I would agree that the Ravens 0-2 start would concern me a little bit more than the Bengals would, quite honestly. And especially because of how it looked in week 2. I mean, that's a big part of this. The Bengals clearly look like week 1 was an aberration now. Week 2 is who they were supposed to be all along. And
right, but it is funny because if you look at it, both the Bengals and Ravens lost to the Chiefs in tough fashion, right? They both played good games at Kansas City. And then they both suffered a loss against teams that are likely not going to win more than 4, 5, or 6 games at home in different ways. The Bengals trying to play catch up, the Ravens blowing a lead. So it's kind of they've lost their 2 games in fairly similar manners, right? It's fairly similar means.
And I know it's the NFL and we shouldn't look at it this way because it's just a week-to-week league. But for me, it's really the order of how it happened. The fact that the Bengals had their game against the Chiefs where they played well second makes me feel like, they're starting to improve. They're starting to figure it out. Whereas the Ravens, it's like, well, they're going backwards. They've got some issues that they've got to work out now. So that could be completely off, obviously.
Well, I will say this. It's going to make that week 5 game, again, they play each other twice, so they can always even itself out. It makes that game huge for both because somebody's coming out of that game with at least their 3rd loss.
Yeah, I honestly, for the Bengals, the fact that the Ravens started 0-2 like this is an absolute saving grace.
Gift.
I mean, just a total gift. Yeah. On a scale of 1 to 10, Skinny, how confident are you in a Bengals win on Monday night at home against the Commanders?
9.9, and I hate to do that because I was the same way in New England, despite all the craziness that was going on leading up to that game, Burrow's wrist and Jamar and will he play, won't he play, T getting hurt. I mean, there was a lot of wonky stuff. I still thought it didn't matter, but I'm extraordinarily confident. I will say this: the fact that Washington runs the ball pretty effectively does give me a little pause for concern, only because if you use the New England blueprint, they come in here and just game manage their way to it. Jaden Daniels has played pretty well through 2 games. I mean, nothing spectacular, but he can also do some damage with his feet, and those guys are always dangerous to play against because they do so many things unscripted, and he's really good doing unscripted things. But to your point, I think the Kansas City game was more of a confidence builder than it was a gut punch.
I am worried about the running of the Commanders, like you just pointed out. But I also feel like this is about as good of a situation for the Bengals as you can walk into. The Commanders are coming off that 21-18 win against the Giants. They're 1-1, but the Giants aren't very good. They squeaked by them in a win. And by the way, they kicked 7 field goals on their way to scoring those 21 points.
Former Bengals kicker Austin Seibert kicked the 7 field goals.
Right. So it's not like they got their offense rolling and really started to pick up some momentum and they're feeling good about themselves coming out of this Giants win. I mean, it's a nice win for them, but it was nothing that really makes you feel like they're playing over their skis or building a bunch of confidence.
It's also a rookie quarterback on the road on Monday night. He's played one road game at Tampa, and Tampa just absolutely annihilated them. I think Jaden Daniels is going to be a good player, and it already has shown some signs of that. But again, rookie quarterback on the road on a Monday night, that's a big, big, big ask.
Yes, it is. All right. Anything else on the Bengals or NFL before we switch gears here to college football?
No, but it has been, I'm telling you, Rick, it's been a crazy couple of weeks. I have a buddy I used to coach basketball with. He's not coaching any longer. You know him. He was running a survivor pool. The pool's already over after 2 weeks. And it had over 100 entries in it, I believe. It's already over.
That's incredible. It's done?
It's done. I'm assuming somebody must have. But keep in mind, now you had probably a lot of people in this marketplace in week 1 took what team, right? And then in week 2, the Ravens were at home against the Raiders, right? And that was, I think, the team that knocked a bunch of people out. And so it is crazy to think that survivor pool is already done 2 weeks in. They're actually starting another one up, I think, starting in week 4. That's insane. That tells you all you need to know about the league right now.
Don't shoot me if this is completely wrong, because I heard a stat and I can't remember what it was exactly. Did I hear right? Is it that underdogs have a winning record now, straight up?
Oh, I didn't see that. It wouldn't surprise me.
It's something. Honestly, there was some type of crazy stat I heard last night while I was listening to something.
I'm trying to
I think it was something.
Hang on. I'm going to go through Sunday's game because I'm in a pool league with a bunch of guys where we pick every game against the spread, and then you put confidence points on them. Like your most confident game is 16 points, etc. All right, so Miami was a favorite and lost. Dallas was a favorite and lost. Tampa Bay was a underdog and won. So that's 3 underdogs that have won outright. Seattle was a favorite one. Indy, who won the Indy game? I'm drawing a blank now. I'm drawing a total blank at who they even played.
They lost to the Packers.
And they were a 3-point favorite. So that's 4 underdogs now that have won. Let's see. Jacksonville, did they win or did they lose?
Lost 18-13 to the Browns.
Right, so that's 5 underdogs now. The Vegas makes 6 underdogs. Minnesota is 7 underdogs. And Atlanta makes 8 underdogs. So underdogs went 8-8 this past week, and I wouldn't be shocked. The first week was so crazy with point spreads, it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, so I mean that's just ridiculous.
Well, that's underdogs, right not even going 8-8. Underdogs won 8 games outright. I'm sorry. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's nuts. So, I mean, it just, like you said, it just tells you what type of NFL we're looking at. But the NFL's always, there's just, I know it's silly, but there's so much parity. It really is.
Well, and injuries, I think, factor in a lot of this too.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor so far this year.
You can always get local stories right here on YouTube, but go ahead and hit that subscribe button to get notifications to stay in the know.